Are you treating your AI transformation just like another technology project? One thing which I think is a big problem which isn't talked about often enough is that AI is kind of like a sunlight disinfectant. If your business has been making good technology and data decisions for the last decade, it's going to be a lot easier than in other companies that haven't done that to get good leverage out of AI technology. What AI isn't going to do for you though is act as a magic silver bullet. If you haven't invested in the right governance, the right controls, the right operating model, and if you don't have enough skilled people in your technology function and in your wider business, you're just never going to get that leverage out of AI. You're going to be doing cleanup project after cleanup project. And the reason for this is simpler than you might expect. Everything that a company does in its operating model is downstream from a decision that someone at the top has made. They've made that inside the constraints that the business faces. Some businesses can afford to spend an absolute ton on technology. They have high enough margins to fund some of these large capex type projects. And they operate in industries where if they don't make these investments, they're going to get outcompeted. Not every business is like that though. And what we're increasingly seeing is companies which have operated almost on fumes and not made investments in technology are now realizing as they get into their AI pilot projects that a lot of the decisions they made in the past haven't set them up for success in the AI era. Essentially, if you don't have clean data, if you don't have well-defined access controls, if you don't have an environment that already has all of the cybersecurity, defense, resiliency, backups, and all of these basic hygiene things sorted, then you're in a much tougher position. Because what's the first thing that AI agents are going to do if you have a security incident inside your own business? Well, they're going to take advantage of all of the weak points that you've left. So because AI is acting as a sunlight disinfectant inside companies like this, the smart ones realize that the first thing they have to do is these cleanup projects. They need to do cybersecurity hardening. They need to fix all of their technology infrastructure. They need to fix their data centers and their cloud configurations. Because if they just let agents loose in their environment, their staff are going to cause untold problems. If the frontier AI labs have demonstrated in the last week or so that they don't always have control of their AI agents, and these AI agents running in sandboxes inside the labs are going out and causing cybersecurity incidents across the rest of the internet, what hope do a lot of companies who've never taken technology seriously have in this era? It's a question that's worth thinking a bit more about. And over on my newsletter, Getting AI to Work, I'm going to be writing more about things like this. If you're interested in that, hit the subscribe link, it's in the description below. One thing I find super interesting in all of this is that because companies are treating it like a technology project, a lot of that how previous technology projects have gone seeps into how they think about AI. If they've done things on the cheap and haven't taken the effort to think really carefully about the trade-offs and the architecture and the design and all of these things, that seeps into how they actually treat AI itself. And what that actually ends up doing is companies which haven't taken technology seriously run the risk of getting exposed and having their own major cybersecurity or data breach or customer service incidents. AI isn't a magical elixir where if you've underinvested in technology, it's going to fix everything. But one thing it is super useful for, and I wish more people would use it for, is on the analysis, interrogation, and understanding side of things. The reality is that if you have an environment, you can gain a lot of understanding about it through using AI agents to help you understand where you have strengths, where you have weaknesses, where you have potential misconfigurations. All of this stuff is super useful if you're concerned about the cybersecurity risk of introducing more AI into your environment. There's also the commercial side of all of this. A lot of companies are struggling to find or articulate that return on spend because they've missed the opportunity to think of this like an operating model redesign. Instead of thinking about raw cost out, there's a lot of consolidation and simplification in any operating model that's possible. There's an interesting contrast between people I know in the corporate world and people who run their own small businesses and how they're adopting and benefiting from AI. The small business owners are already cutting staff, not backfilling roles, cutting vendors, increasing spend on AI tools, but cancelling SaaS subscriptions. Sure, this mightn't work out and they might find themselves going crawling back to vendors that they cut too soon, but they're learning. And that process knowledge and development is one of the most important aspects of AI. This is because if you don't actually use the tools yourself and push them to their limits so you know what works in your specific business to your specific needs, you're at risk of getting oversold by vendors. And a lot of companies are in this position where they've spent a lot on giving people ChatGPT licenses processes, but haven't done the change management or investigation to train people, to set up a culture where they can, through trial and error, make mistakes, learn what works, learn what doesn't, and then apply that into improving agentic workflows that actually help them in their daily life. This is a real problem, and one thing which is even more of a problem is the rhetoric out in society around AI and whether it delivers return on spend or not. And the truth is that just like any other wave of technology in the corporate world, offshoring, outsourcing, whatever you want to call it, companies are going to respond to incentives. And because AI model performance is getting better and better, more tasks and bundles of tasks are better performed by an AI agent instead of a human. And what that means is, over time, more and more bundles of tasks, which we sometimes refer to as jobs, are going to be taken by AI agents. And the people replacing and managing all of these AI agents are going to need to be much more technically skilled. So the play at the moment is leaning in and figuring out all of these skills, deploying your own agent workflows, building side projects with the tools, understanding what's working and what's not working. But in the long run, there are a lot of things which we're not going to be able to outcompete the machines on. So where does that actually leave us? Well, if you're running AI projects in your business, you want to be thinking about what that future state operating model actually looks like. How many people do you need? How many processes do you need? Do you need all these different teams and functions? If you currently outsource stuff to another country, do you actually need all of that back on shore so you've got access to all of the context yourself in your own systems so you can easily access it via your AI tools? Decisions like this are going to be more and more complex because figuring out what the optimal operating model looks like is going to change quite rapidly as more and more bundles of tasks are better done by AI agents. It's still unclear what the wider societal impacts will be in the long run, but the disruption ahead is going to be no different than other disruption waves, and a lot of people trying to claim that AI is just going to go back in the box and people don't want AI doesn't reflect the truth that your competitors and AI-first startups in your space are going to do whatever they can to get the most leverage out of AI tooling. This isn't going to be a fair fight. This is going to be companies that lean in and use AI to its fullest potential against those who are passengers and not interested because they don't want to do that or whatever reason that they can come up with to rationalize not remaining competitive. Where do you think all of this is going? I'd be interested in hearing from you. Is this a completely unhinged perspective, or is this a realistic reflection of how people are thinking about things? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.